Welcome back to the Body Composition Coach podcast. And today is a very different one, actually. Not just because I'm not in the UK, in Bristol. I'm currently in Colorado, in the US, but also because I have a guest with me. So I'm not going to do a massive introduction. I'm going to let him do that mainly. But Cody, thank you for joining me. I really appreciate
Oh,
your time.
yeah.
20 hours ago when I was leaving the UK, I was really looking forward to this and still looking forward to it now. So, Cody, rather than me trying to explain what you do here at N1, where we are now, do you want to just tell everybody a bit about how you would describe what you do?
Sure. Yeah, so I kind of wear many hats for N1 Education. So I am an online coach. I work with both Gen Pop, but most of my clientele is actually other coaches, working on the same things everyone else works on: their goals, their plateaus, strengths and weaknesses, but also gaining the extra knowledge that helps them coach their clients better. That's the coaching side of things. I also do a lot of the techie kind of behind the scenes stuff at N1. So websites, apps, programming, writing articles, making videos, content, stuff like that.
And obviously, the reason we're here today, the day before actually, is for a seminar that I'm going to be learning from you. Mainly, well, quite heavily around biomechanics, but around a few other things to do with transformations. And
Yep.
I mean, maybe you can tell me a bit more about what we're going to be doing tomorrow. And
Yeah.
that might be
Yeah. So Cassim's going to be basically taking you through how to quote unquote optimize transformation, which for most people is going to be, how do I lose fat as quickly as possible without losing muscle or while gaining a little bit of muscle. We'll talk about some of the trade-offs if we're going hard one way to fat loss versus muscle gain, the kind of signs to look for if you're pushing something in the wrong direction, how we can how we can pair certain types of training with certain nutrition restrictions, right? Obviously, if you're going for fat loss, we're going to be restricted on calories. What does that mean for how we need to program so we don't just run someone into the ground or run them into a plateau prematurely? If we hit something that seems to slow down, how do we adjust? So it's a lot of problem solving and a lot of principles that he's going to kind of equip you with to be able to handle basically any kind of transformation you want to handle or that your clients want to achieve.
Mhm. I'm looking forward to being frazzled by the time I go home tomorrow. Well, Sunday. So I suppose my question for you is, because I know you as Cody, the kind of what I would describe as biomechanics expert. I don't know if that's how you describe yourself, but I won't put words in your mouth. But I know you as Cody, the biomechanics expert. But what would you say your area of expertise is? Obviously, you said you're an online coach,
Mhm.
and you work mainly with coaches generally.
Mhm.
But if I was describing you, because generally when I do the podcast, I've got a sleep expert on, or I've got a menopause expert on, or something along those lines. So
Mhm.
how can I summarize you to those who don't know you yet, who will obviously hopefully know you by the end?
Sure. Well, without trying to pigeonhole myself, um, first and foremost, my goal is a problem solver.
Hmm.
Whatever problem I'm trying to solve for the client. And usually that is around programming for transformation, right? Am I trying to grow something specifically? Are we trying to lose fat? Are we trying to improve some area of biomarker, whether that's sleep, energy, right? A lot of your Gen Pop people is like, I'm tired all the time, or I want to have energy to play with my kids, or I'm not sleeping well. It's like, all right, well, what's the first big block that we can fix that's going to make all the other dominoes easy to topple in the direction that we want them to fall?
Hmm.
So problem solving first and foremost, but primarily I focus on program design and nutrition. Um, I can get a little bit into some of the hormonal stuff, but that's once my area of expertise stops, I find the person to refer to, because I'm not gonna, one, I'm not gonna pretend to be something I'm not and waste my client's time. And two, that's just the best option for everybody. So
And more people should probably follow that
yeah,
that advice,
probably,
right?
probably.
And I suppose today we're going to talk a little bit more in depth about the program design stuff more than
Hmm.
anything. So why should people care? So think about the people who are listening to this podcast now who maybe write their own programs. They're probably not coaches. They
Hmm.
might just write their own programs. They probably do show up to the gym consistently. Generally,
Hmm.
people that I work with do. But why should they care about program design?
Well, program design is how to get the most out of what you have available, whether that's your time, the equipment you have, the energy you have, and make it work as efficiently as possible for you. So while you can get results, just go to the gym, pick an exercise, work hard, go to the next exercise, work hard, and go home. Is your goal just to get results, or do you want to get faster results? better results in less time, right? So that's what we're really working towards. And I think that's maybe part of the message that gets lost on social media is like, well, just train hard and you'll get results. Well, of course you will. But if I can get them in half the time or, without, giving myself injuries or throwing my sleep in the trash, I'm going to take that option. So program design is just how do I accomplish this as efficiently and effectively as possible?
How do you think ChatGPT has contributed to that mindset potentially?
Just makes the trash can bigger. So it's, the problem, maybe this is a whole other podcast, but the problem with AI is if it starts working with a trash data set and you ask questions, it's just giving you more trash. And then it's using that answer back in the data set. So it just feeds itself and makes itself better or worse, depending on what it started with. And the same could be said with the fitness social media. If you have a limited set of data that's maybe inaccurate or applied incorrectly, and then you make all of your assumptions based on that, everything you assume or build off of that is going to be subpar, let's say.
Sure. Have you ever noticed as well with AI, generally it wants to agree with you? So if you're designing a program, I've just found if I've had to play around with ChatGPT and put some programming ideas in, it likes to agree with me. So if I say, oh, actually, I don't like hamstring curls, for example, it will give me leg extensions instead. Not necessarily a direct swap for what I had, but because I like it more, it will put that in.
Yep. Again, slight tangent. They apply game theory and they want to make you happy. They want to give you what you want, so you'll come back and use it more.
Sure.
Right. So yes, framing the question is incredibly important. You actually almost have to frame it either neutral or opposite to what you want, so that if it gives you a confirmation, it has to be a strong confirmation to override where you were leading it.
Sure.
The other thing it will do is it will try to defend itself, even if it's wrong. And I've run into that multiple times.
I've seen that.
So don't ask AI to write your programs, please.
So just going then back to your previous point, which was about not just going in and doing anything as long as you're working hard.
Mm-hmm.
Why wouldn't that get you just as good results as some really specific program design? Why isn't it just about working hard? Because most people will understand progressive overload who are listening to this. Most people will understand working close to failure. So surely if you tick those boxes, then that's good enough, right? Or is there something else?
There's a lot of other things. A very simple but crude analogy is if I'm trying to cut a board in half and I've got a hammer and a saw, if I bang on that thing hard enough and long enough with a hammer, it'll break. Or I could take the saw and get it done in half the time in a fraction of the effort. What's a better tool? It'll get the same job done, but what are you putting in and what are you getting out? Maybe my hand goes numb after banging that thing with the hammer so long. Whereas the saw is like, oh, okay, great, job done.
And I suppose it's not just getting to the same result quicker, it's potentially getting to a slightly better result.
It could be a better result. It could be a less detrimental cost, right? Because every bit of effort we put in comes with a cost, whether that's a metabolic cost, a neurological cost, whatever that may be. And maybe one route you can get to let's say you get the same result in the same amount of time, but you develop some kind of itis. You get a joint inflammation or a soreness, or like I said, maybe your sleep or digestion goes off because you're overdoing one thing. Whereas if you've done the other option, you get that same result, but you're not as sore, you're not as wiped out. Maybe you have energy to focus on multiple body parts instead of just the one because of how much effort you're putting into that thing. So it's really about, choosing the best tool for the right payoff, the best payoff.
And I suppose it's quite a wide question when you're picking a tool, but if we talk about picking tools, let's talk about picking exercises. What should people be thinking about if they do still want to design their own program? So they don't want to do coaching, but they want to design their own program. Like what's the first thing people should think about when they're doing that, selecting those exercises?
First thing is, what is their specific goal? And then prioritize. So, and by goal, I don't necessarily just mean muscle gain or fat loss. I'm thinking like, is there a specific movement pattern you want to get better at? Do I want to get a good squatting pattern down, a good pressing pattern down? Is there a specific body part I'm working on? Because once you have things that you can prioritize, it makes all of the following decisions easier rather than what do I pick? What goes first? What goes last? How many sets of this and that? Whereas it's like, well, I want to focus on glutes. It's like, okay, well, I want to focus on that. Let's put it first. Let's, make sure I hit the range of motion for glutes. And then if I have time or energy or the equipment to do something after that, great. But it's not like, well, should I do glutes or should I do hamstrings or should I do delts or should I do this, do that? It's like, pick your priorities, start there. That's the easiest thing to do. And if you have multiple priorities, then the next thing is we have to look at, all right, what's your frequency? And then that gets probably into the frequency versus volume discussion.
Yeah.
That's usually where the next place people go is like, what's the muscle group? How often do I train it? How much do I train it? And, that's the 70% of your program decision.
So it's not so much about if you're going to train legs, just 5 leg exercises, make sure you've hit a glute exercise, a quad exercise, a hamstring exercise. It's more about where do your priorities sit in terms of what you want to target. Would you put them at the top of your program usually?
Usually, with a couple exceptions, that gets into more of advanced program design, picking, stability versus overlapping stabilizers, antagonists, protagonists, all of that kind of stuff. But generally, if you have a priority, putting it first is usually best. One, you're fresh when you come in. You don't have other fatigue that maybe you don't get the output you wanted. You have less limitations from other things being fatigued first. So if you have, glutes, for example, and you're like, well, I don't have a leg press, so I'm going to do a squat or a hip dominant deadlift or something like that. Go ahead and put that first. Whereas if you're like, well, I'm going to do all these other leg exercises and okay, now my knee stability or my hip stability is a little off because my quads and hams are fried. Now I'm going to try and do a deadlift. Well, maybe you're not going to get the same output from the glutes because the other things were fatigued already, and that's going to take away from your priority.
Sure. And I suppose when it comes to whether an exercise is suitable or not suitable, that really does depend on what the outcome that you're expecting is, right? But do you generally think that there are exercises that are, let's say specifically for muscle building in this scenario, do you think there are exercises that are good for muscle building and bad? Well, I don't like using that word really, but bad for muscle building, or I suppose maybe it'd be better with effective or ineffective or efficient and
Yes,
inefficient.
I would say if more or less effective. And again, that depends on how you're using it.
Yeah.
So you might have one thing that by itself maybe isn't going to be as effective as it could be for building muscle, but maybe if you pair it with something, then the effectiveness of that exercise in that context increases. So that's where a well-designed pre or post exhaust, for example, or you have glutes are a good example of this. You might have an exercise that is very specific to the glutes. It doesn't really fatigue anything else, but maybe it's only a very small range of motion, or it's only hard in a very small portion of that range of motion. But if I pair it with something else that kind of fills in the other gaps, and you put it together as like one exercise, right, of superset, now it becomes a really valuable tool.
Yeah. Okay.
So for example, a leg press going into a glute bridge. Leg press, you're also going to get some quads. It's going to be a little bit systemically fatiguing, but it trains the glutes in a lengthened position. It's very stable. It's easy to load there. Maybe you train that to a point and you're like, okay, I don't want to get much more quad volume. That's not my goal. Then you go right into your glute bridge and it's like, well, now it's pretty much just glutes and they're already pre-fatigued. So I don't need a massive amount of load on that barbell to, hit that failure point or whatever. So there's a lot of ways you can mix and match things if you understand the principles of biomechanics and then program design.
And we'll get into, I suppose, the volume conversation in a second, but can you also waste your time by repeating exercises? So for example, you mentioned the hip thrust. Or actually probably a better example is an RDL and a hip extension or a hyperextension, however you would name it. Very similar movement patterns.
Yes.
Right. Would you be wasting your time if you were pairing, or even not pairing, but in the same workout doing those two very similar patterns?
Not necessarily because of how they're loaded.
Yep.
So for example, something that's loaded in the bottom, like a RDL for glutes or hamstrings, length of position, once you fail at the bottom, you're done. Versus you go to a 45 hip extension, et cetera, you can take that into like partials at the end.
Sure.
Right. So you can you can do partials at the top and squeezes and all kinds of other things. And typically because of how that is loaded, you're actually holding less load. So there's less load on your spine. So if you have someone who's like, well, I really want to avoid growing my traps and erectors and stuff, and I don't have all this fancy other equipment, I've got a 45 and a, free weights basically. Like, well, we can't just have you deadlift until you turn blue in the face, or you're going to start looking like a strong woman, strong man, whatever. So maybe we, again, create some kind of superset or post exhaust where we can keep loading the glutes, but with less load on those other tissues. So that's looking at more than just the specific priority, but what's the context of the exercise.
Do you find when you have these conversations, and I suppose maybe when somebody started listening to this podcast, they thought they were going to get right, what's the best exercise for glutes? What's the best exercise?
I'm just going to write it down and do it.
But actually, probably so far in this chat, the answer for everything has been it depends, but with context.
Yeah, trying to give you what it depends on if I can.
Exactly,
right?
exactly. And I think I try and do this with clients all the time when they ask me, would you do this exercise or this exercise? The answer is always it depends. But hopefully, if you have the context to what you're trying to achieve or the context to what you're trying not to achieve, it makes the selection a little bit easier. Right?
Yep. And that's probably one of the biggest things we focus on with N1 and the courses. It's like, what are the tools you need so you can answer the questions or ask the right questions and then fill in the blanks. We're never just like, well, just do this exercise for this. It's like, well, here's the characteristics of this exercise so you can figure out where it fits in the context of your workout or your client's workout.
Sure. And I think one of the questions I get asked all the time that is probably a good time to talk about is like sets and reps and frequency. Mm-hmm. So I know when I was learning to be a coach, like 17 years ago now, when I did my initial qualifications, it was muscle building range, endurance range, strength range for sets and reps. Things have moved on.
I'd say it's actually expanded.
Yeah.
So I would say that it's not a hard line between those things. Like I was taught that same thing initially too.
Like if you did 7 reps.
Right. Oh, now you're in functional hypertrophy.
Yeah.
It's not strength, but it's not hypertrophy. It's functional hypertrophy.
Yeah.
It's really on a spectrum. And even within that spectrum, you have an individual shift in where that spectrum is. Right. So, for one person, 6 to 8 might be great for strength building for them. Another person, that might be cardio just about, right? So you have a spectrum within a spectrum. So you have to understand, all right, the principle, right? The lower we go, the more it is towards a neurological or strength type of stimulus. The higher we go, the more metabolic type of cost we'll get out of it. And then you just kind of shift from there as you work with the person or assess them, see how they respond and just move them along. Or what's the goal of the program? What are we trying to achieve right now?
So it's not quite as simple as the narrative now of, well, it doesn't really matter what reps you do as long as you work to failure or close to failure. It's not quite as simple as that.
Yeah, I think that it's overly simplified.
Yeah.
Right? Because it is true for the most part. There's a very wide rep range. If you go to failure or close to failure, you're going to build muscle, or you can build muscle. But where that loses context is what else is happening besides just the hypertrophy stimulus. We've got the metabolic stimulus, the neurological stimuli that are occurring based on the loading and the rep range and the exercise and all of those other variables. And that's where the coach has to kind of step in and be like, well, 4 to 6 is great for your strength building here, but for this exercise, 6 to 8 is probably a safer bet, or it's just better for this exercise for XYZ reason.
I don't know if you get this because you mainly coaches, I suppose. But one of the things I've noticed recently is more and more people coming to me almost seeing that anything beyond 8 reps is pointless. Maybe because they've absorbed a lot of that information from social media. And one of the things that I try and explain to them all the time, and I'm not sure if you do the same, is that lifting is a skill. And sometimes going beyond 8 reps at a weight that is failure for you, going to 12, going to 15 reps is actually helping you to develop the skill of lifting, depending on what that movement pattern is. So it's not always about, right, how do I make this set the most effective muscle building stimulus I can possibly provide for myself, right? It's actually what else goes around that, and that is the skill of lifting first and foremost.
Yep. And that actually plays kind of into the training age or the skill of the lifter, but the characteristics of the exercise. Exercises that have a high stability or coordination demand are going to be much more challenging to take to failure in those lower rep ranges, and potentially less safe depending on what that is, right? What's easier, taking a set of 12 to failure on squats or a set of 4? Like, especially someone who's by themselves at the gym is like, do I go for that last one? Am I not coming back up? Like, what's going to happen? So there's context there of like safety and stability. Or in the glute realm, you have like your cable kickbacks.
Mhm.
Like how hard is it just to stabilize a 4-rep max on a glute kickback?
I'd say it's close to impossible
It's
unless,
close to impossible. You're basically doing a step up,
yeah.
right? At that point, you have enough load on there. If you can do a step up, that's how much load you need. So those exercises just work better at a lighter intensity or higher rep range, right? You can work in a lower rep range, but you have to pre-fatigue yourself, or you have to have done other things before, so you don't need that load, or you have to work at a higher rep range. And someone might say the argument, well, just use a different exercise where you can load it heavier. It's like, but then we're neglecting the benefits of that exercise, which are the range of motion, the specificity to the portion of the glutes I want to train, maybe the orientation of the femur, the leg path I want to train. So it's always a trade-off. And just making, some of the blanket statements of, 6 to 8 reps is all you need, maybe in some places, but not necessarily in others. And that's a coach's job, is to find where does that not apply, and then how do I fix it for the client.
And you mentioned stability, because again, in the realm of social media, I don't know if you've ever seen any of the, I want to call them spoofs, but I actually think people have been serious, where they've sat on a machine of some kind, maybe a leg extension, and they're doing some kind of like shoulder exercise with the leg extension or something like that. I'm sure everyone's seen those. But how important is the stability element? Is it a case of every exercise should be stable if you want to build muscle, or is it a case of you need to pick certain exercises? Like, how do you see it?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the answer is you only need to be stable enough. You only need to be stable enough that stability is not limiting your output in the exercise. After that, it doesn't matter. And in fact, it might just make it worse, because you're focusing more on trying to stabilize yourself or add all these external stabilities. It might actually interfere with the movement pattern. Right. So it's like, all right, well, I'm doing a leg extension. I'm in the seat. If I'm doing my leg, like, do I need to seatbelt myself in? Am I lifting up? Do I need a seatbelt? Do I need to like mummify myself to the chair so that only that can move and I'm not even shifting the seat? No, I'm just wasting time and energy trying to mess with all those other things. And I think, things get taken to an extreme on social media, of people like putting their arms in foam rollers and doing all kinds of like weird holding Bluetooth handles and whatnot that, I don't know, would have got you like thrown out of the gym 15 years ago. Because they see the one thing and then they try to apply it everywhere else without maybe using the critical thinking skills of like, well, when do I really need to be concerned about this thing? And
I think as well with stability, it's quite contextual. This, I suppose, is just my opinion, but if you ask me to do a set of barbell squats to failure, I've done a lot of squats over the last 17 years. If you ask somebody who's maybe only got the training age of 1 year, 2 years, 3 years to go barbell squats to failure, I might be quite stable doing barbell squats to failure, and I'd probably be quite safe because I can unwrap
your
the bar
limit,
from,
and
my back if I need to. So again, stability is dependent on the individual too, right? But,
to a degree. So that would be, I would classify that as coordination.
Okay.
So stability is the factors of the exercise. Coordination is your nervous system's ability to handle the joint forces and that, right? So that's actually kind of what I was alluding to earlier of the load differences going to failure. Right. You could get to like a one rep in reserve failure squat and it might look darn near exactly the same. Whereas, Grandma Sue is like 8 reps from failure and she's wobbling like this. And you're like, I don't know. Is that really, if we take you to 1 RIR, is something going to break, or are you going to slip? Or maybe your muscles could have actually handled going up, but the stabilizers or the coordination of the movement throws you off. Oh, and now you're not stable in this position and something happens. So that's the skill that you want to accumulate over many sets and higher reps, easier to ingrain those patterns, because learning those coordination patterns, the nervous system needs frequency. It needs frequency of the reps, sets, over days, over time, to get you to the point where you can take that, eye-popping, spleen-busting last rep, and you're safe.
And this is, I suppose, where the debate of machines versus free weights kind of rages on, I suppose, right? And there is, I suppose, no correct answer. It's not machines or free weights.
There's benefits to both. There's cons to both. Machines might provide more, stability. They might for example, pressing and pulling machines, they provide a fixed arm path. That can be good and bad. It could be good as, it forces you to maintain a consistent range of motion or path. But if it's not lined up correctly, it might be uncomfortable. It might actually not be guiding you towards the tissue you're trying to train. It might actually limit your range of motion. For example, in pressing movements, you might not get the full retraction range because you have a pad and arm path where you could get that range in other exercises. So there's trade-offs, and it's just learning, again, the program design. Well, you could use both. Use one for what it's good for, use the other for what it's good for. I do that all the time. It's like, cable exercises are great for getting ranges of motion, and you can line up everything kind of how you want it, but maybe sometimes they're less stable. Get the ranges of motion, then go to a machine. Now I can just work hard in the range that it provides. Cool. I've hit both boxes.
I have noticed, I don't know if it's a growing trend or whether it's always been there actually, but this idea that when clients first come in and speak to me, they do have this preconceived idea of, oh, no, I want to just use free weights. So I want to use mainly free weights because they're better in some way, superior in some way. And obviously you're explaining there that that's context dependent, maybe not. But I think the thing that people say the most, I'm trying to think, why do people think that when they first speak to me? And I suppose the thing that or the way they explain it is the smaller muscles, the stabilizing muscles get more work. So therefore that's better.
Not necessarily. Actually, I could make and this will get into the nerdy stuff of there's cases when using fixed machines will actually recruit more of other tissues than you would if you had just used a free weight.
Sure.
So there are trade-offs. It's not as black and white as that. What they're actually probably thinking of, it's harder to balance weight. So I have to work harder to balance it. But is balancing the weight what's growing the tissue that you're trying to train? No. That's extra work for your nervous system.
Yeah.
Do you need to learn that? Yes. Should that be the focus of your effort in the gym? Probably not. So that's where I would use both. It's like, all right, let's use this so you can get good at the movement of coordinating a dumbbell press.
Yeah.
Once we've got that, now we're going to go over to this machine press, and we're just going to work really hard for 1 to 2 sets, because even if you're fatigued a little bit and you shake a little bit, I'm not worried about you, needing a new set of teeth.
Sure.
Right.
I think it's almost as if people think that if you do barbell squats and you go out into the outside world and you'll be able to survive, if you only do a leg press, you will walk out the door of this gym now and kneecaps will just blow because we haven't stabilized some muscles. But that's not the case, right?
No. There, like I said, there's a time and place for everything, and there's pros and cons to leg press, squat. It's just learning, and that's what I love. Those maturing in the gym is when, and then it's something ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like maturing in the gym is when you learn that there's a time and a place for just about everything.
Yeah.
And you need to learn when and where that is.
And I think it probably fits into this conversation nicely because we're talking about free weights versus machines and stability and instability. But mind muscle connection, I think that's something that I've changed my mind on a few different times in context. But how important is mind muscle connection? I suppose people would, when I say mind muscle connection, if anyone doesn't know what I'm talking about, it's almost like feeling the muscle. So if you're doing a hip thrust, really feeling your glutes doing the work. If you're doing a squat, well, it depends obviously how you're set up for the squat, but really feeling the glutes or the quads doing the work. How important is that?
I would say it's more important to use it as a guideline, like bumper rails, than your like golden ticket. Yes, this is great. Because the mind muscle connection, if you're not experienced enough or you've been taught a certain way, you focus more on the sensation of a feeling in the muscle. And then it becomes all of these circus tricks of like, well, how do I make you feel something there? And we see a lot of that recently, especially with some of the glute things, like holding the block, squeezing the blocks between the legs while doing the RDLs. It's like, the hard part is explaining that requires a background in neurology. But people are like, oh, I feel my glutes. I'm like, but that doesn't mean they're growing.
It's also the lifting of the toes or lifting of the
toes in the RDL. It's a nerve stretch. You're getting a nerve stretch that's happening there. It's not your hamstrings stretching any further than they were before. In fact, that nerve stretch might actually make you stop prematurely. Because that's the sensational feedback to your nervous system before your hamstrings get a full stretch. Right. So it can be good and bad. What I would say the important thing of the mind muscle connection is knowing when you're not hitting what you're intending to hit.
Mm-hmm.
So just knowing like the area of like back stuff. Like, you can't see your back. You can't, like, it's hard for people to like have the proprioception of like what's actually going on. But, as a coach, it's like, well, this is where your lats are.
Mm-hmm.
And they're pulling and they're like, no, I feel it up here. It's like, okay, then you check their setup, maybe the setup is a little bit off. You can use it as that kind of tool. And then as people get more experience and you're better at like feeling, okay, that's what my bicep feels like. This is my forearm brachioradialis, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And you're doing something, you're like, something else is fatiguing first.
Yeah.
You can use it as that kind of feedback of like, am I doing an exercise that's actually targeting something else? Does my setup need to change? Or, oh, that was fatigued from yesterday type of thing. Or it could be, well, these are supposed to work together. So I'm probably going to feel a little bit of both.
I think as well, people are super sensitive. Just an example that came to mind there, super sensitive with things like an RDL when it comes to, I should only feel this in my glutes or my hamstrings and nothing else. And if they feel maybe some sensation in their lower back, for example.
Yeah.
Now, some people might well be worried about that and probably should be, in some scenarios. But that's one of those examples where actually your lower back is involved in the movement in some way. So feeling it in there isn't necessarily the end of the world, but obviously I'm saying that very cautiously because
sure. Well, we use it as a signal to the coach. We're like, okay, is there something there I need to be cautious of? I'm watching. It's like, okay, you are kind of flexing, extending, or you're coming down a little bit fast. Let's fix that. Mm-hmm. But then if they're like, oh, my low back just gets fatigued when I do this, I'm like, well, that's probably okay because you probably have been concerned about your back and avoided loading your back for such a long time. It's probably behind your other muscle groups. So maybe for now, we actually need to strengthen that thing. And then once it gets stronger, you won't feel it anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. I think probably an area we brushed over there actually, when we're talking about the sets and the reps, is the sets itself. So something I've started doing a little bit more of is not always doing a minimum of 3 sets. Now, I mean, I'm somebody who grew up with Charles Poliquin doing 10 sets of 10 and, huge amounts of volume, if anyone remembers that.
Yeah.
But is it okay to do 3 sets? Is it okay to do more than 3 sets, or is 2 sets enough for most people?
Yeah, and I think that comes back to priority.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, if it's a priority and I want to grow it, there are mountains of volume saying that more sets taken sufficiently close to failure is going to grow more muscle. Mm-hmm. Now, there's a point of diminishing returns, of course, like, the 12th set maybe doesn't create as much stimulus as the second set, but it's still more. And there's a lot of data to back that up. So you get the people saying, oh, 2 sets is all you need. All you need for what and for who, right? If your goal is bare minimum, I achieved muscle growth, sure. 1 set might be enough.
Yeah.
Twice a week, maybe. But if your goal is, I want to grow this thing, I have the time and the effort to put into it, that's where you shift volume based on your priority. Maybe some stuff, yeah, two sets, that's fine. I don't care if it grows. I just want to maintain it. But this thing I really want to focus on, well, yeah, maybe now I'm doing 6 sets twice a week or 7 sets or 8. Who knows? Depending on the muscle group.
Yeah.
And architecture and all that fun stuff. But yeah, I think it's, again, people want the easy pill. They want to just say 2 sets is enough. That's all I have to do. I'll get great gains. 6 sets. Oh, that's too much fatigue. You'll never recover from that. And I'm like, clearly you've never trained hard in your life long enough, right?
Everyone suddenly
you
so
haven't built that up yet. Yeah. I'm sure you did, back in the, following the Poliquin stuff, like doing crazy amounts, about 20 sets a week for different body parts and all kinds of stuff. So you will survive it, guys. You won't die. You won't get rhabdomyolysis? Whatever that is.
I remember the supersets of dumbbell press with pull-ups. I would get about 9 sets in. I'd have to go throw up. I thought I was being really productive and just didn't think about the fact that actually I was probably doing more harm than good at that point.
Right.
If I was throwing up every session.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was volume to extreme. I've lost my train of thought there, what I was going to ask you, but you mentioned frequency. You said then about prioritizing something if you might even train it 3 times a week. So something I generally tend to do if somebody comes to me, and glutes is obviously the obvious one a lot of the time, but sometimes for guys it's arms or shoulders or so. How often would you, if I was an athlete coming to you now and I was saying, right, my priority is my glutes. I don't care what else happens. I want my glutes to grow. How often would you be training them?
You could potentially do them 4 times a week. I'd say that's on the extreme end. And And again, this depends on the training edge of the client.
Mm-hmm.
If you got someone coming in who's like only got 1 or 2 years of experience, twice a week is probably plenty. You've got someone who's been training for 10 years, they've competed, they've already grown some mass there, and they're like, I need to really take this to the next level. That's when we start getting more specific. And that's where the biomechanics really comes into play of being able to select those exercises so there's not too much overlap. So, for example, you've got pecs, lats, glutes, kind of the big three that are like your fan-shaped muscles, which basically just means they can pull in multiple angles, essentially. So you can actually pick and choose which exercises you want to use to kind of divide that pie up into slices and say, okay, well, this day we're going to train this slice, and then we're going to train this slice, and then we're going to train this slice, or maybe we're just going to train the ends, and then one day we'll train the middle, right? So you can use that to your advantage of breaking up that volume, which also allows you more, recovery between directly hitting those fibers per se. But you're not ever getting necessarily zero, right? If you hit the middle, you're getting a little bit on either side.
So you're talking specifically about things like training in simple terms, upper chest, mid chest, lower chest, by doing an incline, a flat, a decline.
Yep.
Yeah.
You could. And it drives me nuts when people are like, just do one. It doesn't matter which angle you pick. I'm like, I think we need to go to the whiteboard because
get the skeleton out.
Right. Yeah. Like, oh, just hit the middle. I was like, yeah, you'll hit everything else. But again, it becomes how much of a priority is it? How fast do you want it to grow? Like, can you grow your chest just doing like this straight horizontal press? Absolutely. But depending on your structure or, whatever else, maybe this falls behind. Maybe your lower pec falls behind. Would it have grown better if you maybe did a couple decline, a couple incline, and a couple in middle spread out? Most likely.
And I suppose there's a skill in recognizing that in somebody, right? When you say, could you have got more upper pec development? Could you have got more lower pec development? Could you have got, slightly different development across your glutes in different parts, for example? There's a skill in recognizing where somebody might need to bring up a certain portion of the glute or a certain portion of the pec or delts or anything really, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a combination of just being able to look and assess the physique, but then also assess the structure, right? So in regards of chest, you've got even the angle, like people's angle of their clavicle differs, which determines how much upper is going to get recruited in the different angles. Sternum angle, which is going to affect, how much of a flat press becomes actually a lot of lower pec versus upper pec. So structure differences like that, looking at someone as a coach is helpful to help you pick exercises and setups that are going to kind of fill in those gaps for them.
I think that's where a lot of my clients probably think when they have to send me a form review, they probably think I'm just looking at that form review with, so that's either right or it's wrong. That's how you perform it or that's not how you perform it.
Yep.
But actually the reality is for coaches like us, it's, okay, is that actually hitting what I want it to hit? Is that exercise delivering the outcome that I want it to deliver? Because people are all different shapes and sizes, but also people perform exercises in very different ways with different emphases and different angles. I'm trying to keep it reasonably simple without nerding too much before we do this weekend. But hopefully you understand what I'm saying there in that everybody performs exercises slightly differently and therefore they might get slightly different outcomes. So it's not just about, is it correct or incorrect? It's how is it being performed and how is it feeding into the bigger picture of the program that I've designed, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking I've got 3 guys, then they all do sternal presses at 3 different angles to hit the same tissue because one's got a really, big kind of barrel chest and he naturally, or like just big barrel chest, and the other is like a little bit flatter and the other's a little bit flatter. So we have to adjust their bench angle to hit the same tissue, right? It's not just about, this and, keep them stacked and all that stuff. There's a setup component to it.
And I think I've got one more question, and let me know if you think I've missed anything. But tempo, and again, I'm going back to Poliquin days. It was so heavily emphasized that tempo was this magical thing, and if you added an extra second here or there on the eccentric or concentric, it would make a huge difference to the outcome. Where are we at with it now? Is tempo that important?
This is where I'm going to say it depends where.
Yeah.
So, and the context. So, and I remember exactly what you're talking about. He was like, oh, that was the time under tension debate, right? It was like, oh, you add an extra second, you added, 20% time under tension. So you're going to get 20% more stimulus. And we're like, now we know, like, it doesn't really play out quite like that. But where it does matter is looking at the physics component of it, meaning the momentum and inertial properties. And that's something Kasim actually kind of really dove into recently and kind of like, woke my mind up about after thinking, I was like, oh yeah, that's a good point. Because we're working with a mass moving through space, and let's do a dumbbell press or a dumbbell lateral raise. Going from a 4-second to a 3-second, or even a 5-second to a 3-second eccentric, the momentum and inertial properties of that don't change a ton.
Mm.
So if you prescribe a 4 and they do a 3-second eccentric, am I going to freak out? Probably not. If they go from like a 2-second to a 1.5-second, it does something like doubling the inertial properties. So imagine going down in a 2.5-second squat and then going to a 2-second squat. The amount of extra load your body and your joints have to coordinate and handle at the bottom of that squat jumps dramatically.
Yeah. So is that simply because of the speed? It's actually quite fast now at that point?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the faster it is, the incremental changes have like magnitude greater impact on what actually is happening in that exercise. And the range of motion matters too, right? Obviously moving 3 seconds through a small range of motion versus a big range of motion is a considerable difference, right? So it's like, am I going to worry about doing a 1-second eccentric on a calf raise where my range of motion is this big? No. But a 1 second on a dumbbell press or a squat where I'm moving through like this much range of motion, that's going to have a big impact. That's a lot of weight moving really fast that my body then has to stop. Versus a 3-second control that might be half of the load that I'm having to resist there. So that's where I become more of a stickler with my clients, is like if I'm programming shorter tempos or something, I really want them to be cognizant of the count, versus most of the time I will say I want a controlled tempo, which is typically 3 seconds for most exercises, maybe 2.5. But I'm rarely going to say like, all right, do a 1-second eccentric on this, because someone's going to dive bomb it and then they're going to get even the smallest bit out of alignment, and then some tissue can't handle that tolerance, and then that's when you tear something.
I'm trying to think of a practical example, and I suppose the first thing that came to mind is like a car, for example. If you're trying to stop your car rolling down a hill physically and it's on a very, very small gradient, that's going to be reasonably easy. It's not going to run you over. If that car's coming at you at some speed and you've got to stop it from rolling down the hill, you're going to get hurt, right? So it's not that you're going to always get hurt if you lift fast, but your injury risk increases, obviously. But that's mainly because of what you're saying, which is the increased momentum. Therefore, like at the bottom of a squat, that increased momentum at the bottom, you have to try and stop that car or stop that barbell.
Yep.
And if it's moving quicker, it's actually in theory heavier. Right?
There's more inertia you have to overcome to be able to decelerate that load.
Yeah.
Right. So, if it was going from let's say the tempo change effectively made it twice as hard, to have the same amount of resistance to stop it, you would either need twice the distance or twice the force.
Yeah.
Essentially, it's not quite how that math works out, but right. And it's like, well, do I have twice the distance to stop it from here to here when I'm trying to decelerate, or do I have to just stop it faster?
I'm just thinking about the time I tore my pec years ago when I was probably I think I was about 19, tore my pec, and that was a fast bench press, letting it almost drop and then trying to, stop that momentum, I suppose, at the bottom. Not saying it was all that. It was probably the fact I was training chest 6 times a week.
No, that was it too. Yeah, it's funny. That's the thing that kills me when I go to a public gym or something and I see the people, everyone, they dive bomb it, and then it's like it's like, here's like a third of the rep, and then 2/3 of the rep is, I'm like, if your concentric is slower than the eccentric, that's the first thing we need to fix.
So there is nothing like a torn pec to correct that.
Oh, yeah. Well, you have a lot of time to think about it while your arm's in a sling.
Exactly. Exactly. So, I mean, look, we've covered program design and different exercise selections and sets and reps and tempos and time and attentions, and I'm trying to think what else we've talked about. But do you think there's anything that we haven't covered that somebody would need to know or think about when it comes to if they're designing their own workouts, or how they can make their own workouts more efficient and effective?
I would say we kind of brushed on it earlier, is understanding biomechanics. And it's a big, scary word, but really all it means is like, how are you setting up the exercise to train the tissue you want to train? That's all that it means. And going back to our initial conversation of like, well, just working hard on an exercise, if you're not setting that exercise up correctly, you might be working something else more than you are the thing that you're trying to train,
Mhm.
right? So pecs and delts is a good one. I've had multiple clients come to me and they're like, well, my chest isn't growing. And I'm like, but you have massive front delts. I'm like, I don't need to see your video. I know exactly how you press. Here's what we need to fix, right? And that's a biomechanics thing, right? They're doing a chest press, but the way they're doing it is growing the thing that they're not concerned about, and it's missing the thing they want to grow. So that's where understanding, biomechanics, at least at a surface level. And then, if you want to get into the details of it, having a coach or someone who can watch you and help you becomes dramatically more valuable, because like, what's more expensive, hiring a coach or wasting your time for multiple years not getting the result, right? It's like, if you have the money, you're going to pay the coach because it'll get you there faster, rather than spending all your money on your gym membership and your supplements and all the other stuff and missing the biggest piece of the pie, which is just doing the exercise and the program in a more effective manner.
I suppose there's an element as well with the biomechanics conversation of not just the performance of the exercise, but also the human being themselves, right? Because again, the thing that sprung to mind straight away is if we think about a squat, like me and you might do a squat at the same time, but mine's more quad dominant, yours is more hip dominant, and therefore I'll get bigger quads in theory.
Yes.
And nobody look at I've got my glasses on right now. But in theory, I would get bigger quads and you would get bigger glutes. But we're in theory doing the same thing, right?
Correct.
So it's not just performance based, it's also, or how you perform an exercise, it's structure based, and a good coach would be able to look at your structure, look at like your femur length or whatever, and decide, actually, do you know what, your squat is too quad dominant, so we need to just adjust that somehow and create a more glute dominant squat, or actually just change exercise, because it's not that squat's a bad exercise for you, but for the outcome that you want, that squat's not going to get you that. So we need to do more of something else.
Correct. Yep. Same thing applies for machines. Just learning how to set up the machine correctly for one person versus another. Yeah. Well, all those little setup things can drastically change the outcome, right?
And I've got to ask you, what are you guys working on at the minute? You, Kasim, and the N1 team. What's on the agenda?
He'll probably give you a sneak peek of some of that here today or tomorrow, I guess.
You don't want to give too much away.
Yeah, I don't want to give too much away. Lots of cool nerdy stuff for sure. And then some, hopefully some myth busting stuff that we can throw out in the fitness space to alleviate a lot of the headaches of having to look at some of the posts on physics and biomechanics. And so
I'm looking forward to it. So Cody, where can people find you? Like, here's your plug yourself. Where can people find you? Where can they hear more from you?
Yep. So easiest one is my Instagram, just Cody J Moxley. On the N1 pages, N1.education, N1.training. I collaborate and post some stuff on there, and those are the same addresses for the website, N1.training, N1.education, no.com.
Awesome. Well, listen, thanks so much for your time.
Oh, it was a pleasure.
It's been a long day, but it's a good way to end the day. I'm looking forward to the course across the weekend. I'll fill everyone in on how the course goes at some point.
Excellent.